Good morning, friends. Today we are going to learn the next part of practical criticism for your semester 6th Introduction to Literary Criticism paper. In the previous lectures, we learned about what is practical criticism, what is the meaning of critical appreciation, and what are the structural devices used for the critical appreciation, what are the sound devices for the critical appreciation, and what are the sense devices used for the critical appreciation. Those devices are related, or those devices are the different figures of speech, that is simile, metaphor, onomatopoeia, personification, and those include in the structural, sense, and sound devices. Now, in this particular lecture, we are going to learn the next part of it, an example of critical appreciation of the poem. In the last lecture we learned about the lyric. After that, what is the other figures of speech, structural devices, and again the devices which are important and useful for the critical appreciation of the poem. So, types of poems are also important one: ode, elegy, ballad, song, or lyric, and here the sonnet, next part, which is remaining in the last lecture. In this lecture, we will learn about it and move towards the critical appreciation of the poem. What is the sonnet? It is a poem of 14 lines. It follows a very strict rhyme pattern. First part of this kind of poem is 14 lines poem. That is a speciality of that sonnet. That's why it is called as a or named as a sonnet. According to L.J. Alexander, there are three types of sonnet: Petrarchan, Shakespearean, and Miltonic. The structure of the Petrarchan and the Miltonic sonnet is almost the same. There are two stanzas. The first one is of 8 lines, that is called as octave, and the second one is of 6 lines, that is called sestet. The rhyme scheme of both of them is also the same. The only difference is that after the octave in the Petrarchan type, there is a break in thought, whereas in the Miltonic type there is not such a break, and the same thought is continued in the sestet also. The Shakespearean sonnet contains 3 stanzas of 4 lines each. They are called quatrains. The last 2 lines are called a rhyming couplet or a heroic couplet. So, here is a 3 types of sonnet. If you are going to write down the practical criticism, critical appreciation of the sonnet, you should remember what type of sonnet it is. Linguistic approach also is useful and helpful for appreciating a poem. According to it, a close and systematic study of the elements of language and the principles of governing their combination and organization that go to constitute any utterance. The study of phonemes, morphemes, words, cohesion, parallel grammatical structures, repetitions, etc. help a lot to understand mood, feeling, and intention of the poet. So, linguistic things in the poem is also useful for appreciating of a poem. So, you must know What are the elements of language and principle of governing the combination and organization that go to constitute any utterance? Practicing critical appreciation. See, while appreciating a poem, student must read the poem minutely. In the first lecture of practical criticism, I discussed about the minute reading, the first reading, and you must know what is the implied meaning behind the particular poem. Try to understand properly the theme, meaning, and figures of speech in the poem. So, there are those devices, that is, structural devices, sense devices, and sound devices are important in the poem or for understanding of the theme, meaning, and figures of speech. Short questions would help students to know the type and structure of the poem, symbols, and images used by the poet. See, here in your exam or while practicing for the critical appreciation, you can create questions, or in your exam there will be the questions on the particular poem and you are going to answer that questions, and it will be your critical appreciation of that poem. So short questions useful for the appreciation of the poem. Use of language. See, when you are going to appreciate the poem, you must know what kind of use of language is there. Answering these short questions separately is not the correct appreciation. So, you can write down the appreciation of the poem in the paragraphs and try to answer those questions in the paragraphs one by one. Questions are only indicators which would bring unity in the appreciation. Why? Questions might be related to the theme, related to the title, related to the rhyme scheme, related to the intention of the poet. So, questions are only the indicators for the critical appreciation. See, here is an example of On His Blindness poem by John Milton. This is the actual poem. When I consider how my light is spent, or half my days in this dark world and wide, and that one talent which is dead to hide, lodged with me useless, though my soul more bent, to serve there with my Maker and present, my true account, lest he returning chide. Doth God exact day, labor light denied? I fondly asked, but patience to prevent. That murmur soon replies, God doth not need either man's work or his own gifts, who best bear his mild yoke. They serve him best his state. His kingly thousands of thousands at his biding speed, and post over land and ocean without rest. They also serve who only stand and wait. See, on his blindness, the poem here we can understand what is the poem, and the next part is of critical appreciation of this poem. There are 6 questions. What is the theme of the poem? Explain the term talent. What type of a poem is this? Give an example of personification. What does the poet say about the god's power? What is the rhyme scheme of the poem? See, here you can complete all the aspects of critical appreciation. First part, theme, any important term in the poem, again type of the poem, again figures of speech, that is personification. Next, about the imagery, God's power, and the rhyme scheme in the poem. So, these are the questions which will be useful for the critical appreciation. Here, the critical appreciation of the poem. The present poem is a beautiful sonnet. It is one one of the highly personal and best poems of John Milton. He was a great reader of literature. He wrote different types of poems. For example, odes, sonnets, elegies, epics, and some long poems. Paradise Lost is his most famous epic. His hard work of reading and writing made him blind in 1652, and this sonnet was written in 1655. The theme of the poem is Milton's becoming blind. He was frightened because of his blindness. He thought he would be unable to serve God due to his blindness. See how two questions answered in this particular paragraph. That is, how it is a sonnet, that is, the type of the poem is a sonnet. Next part, what is the theme of the poem and why he is written this poem on his blindness, because the poet himself became blind in 1652 and the sonnet was written in 1655. So you must know what is the extra knowledge about that poet and about the particular idea developed in the poem. Again, it is written by Milton, so it is called Miltonic Sonnet, and hence there is no break in thought after the octave. The octave deals with Milton's doubts and regret regarding his inability to utilize his gift of poetic expression given to him by God. He describes God as a strict taskmaster, as he has stopped writing poems due to his blindness. He thinks God would be angry with him for not using his talent. There is a biblical reference to talent. One meaning of talent is a coin and other is gift of the art of writing poetry given by God. There is a parable in the Bible. There was a Lord who gave some talents, it means coins, to his three servants before going on a journey. When he came back, one of the servants told him that he had kept the coins safe but unused. The Lord became angry with him for not using them. Like that, Milton thinks his talent, that is the poetic art, will remain unused after he is becoming blind. So, how the images from the Bible or the biblical references used in this particular poem, you must know what are the references used by the poet. But this mood of fear and regret is driven away in the sestet. Patience is personified in the poem. Patience tells Milton that God never expects or takes back his own gifts given to man. He doesn't need any help, service from man. He is like a king. There are thousands of angels waiting for his order. Patience points out that those who work hard and wait for God's order, they also get God's grace. Milton here reaffirms his faith in God. His regret over the loss of his eyesight is converted into God's kindness. So, in this poem, we can understand how the poet write about his blindness and as well as his faith on God, about his poetic art and his talent of poetic art. This is the way you are going to write down the critical appreciation of any poem. That's why you must know structural devices, sound devices, and sense devices, and at the same time, what type of poem it is. Through the use of those questions, you are going to answer those questions and write down your critical appreciation of any poem. The poem expresses noble and lofty thoughts of Milton. This is the theme of poem. It has a well-knit structure. There is a fine rhyme scheme ABBA, ABBA, CDE, CD. No doubt it became highly personal, passionate, and remarkable poem of Milton. So, this is the concluding line, that is, it became highly personal, passionate, and remarkable poem of Milton. In the last paragraph, you are going to write down the answer of the answer of the question, that is, what is the rhyme scheme of the poem. So in this way you can also write down the critical appreciation of the poem. In the next lecture we will move towards our next paper of English novels. In this particular literary criticism, introduction to literary criticism, we learn 4 modules, and the practical criticism is the last part of it. So practice for the poems and practice for the critical appreciation of the poem. So in the next lecture we will move towards the next paper of English novel. Till then, stay safe, stay home.